Welcome to Snow Talk, where the Snow and Ice Management Association brings you trends, stories, news, and personalities that are shaping the professional snow and ice management industry. This season of Snow Talk is sponsored by Western Snowplows and Fisher Engineering. So settle in and let's talk snow.
Hello, folks, and welcome back to another episode of CIMA's podcast, Snow Talk. My name is Evan Newman, Member Services Senior Manager here at CIMA, and I'm happy you're joining us for this episode today. Our episode guest has been fostering growth with his company since 1995, making his company one of Northampton, Massachusetts' leading residential and commercial lawn, landscape, and snow providers. The company has been able to scale to this level because of passionate leadership and team members who recognize the value of selling safety and working hand in hand with clients to set goals to properly grow the business. I'm happy to be joined today by owner and lead designer at BetterView Landscapes, Mr. Torrey Shlanda. Welcome to the Snow Talk studio, Torrey. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited about this.
You're passionate, obviously, Torrey, about growing the snow industry. We've talked about it a number of times over the last year since I've got to know you through our interest groups and some different events that we've seen each other at. You're also passionate about the opportunity for young people and driven business owners alike to grow the industry. Where does that passion come from? What inspired you to kind of get started?
Yeah, it's funny. So first of all, I love snow, right? So which people are like, what? Well, I love snow. I'm a big skier. So I had this love for snow. And as a kid, I loved playing in snow. But on the business side, as far as snow management is concerned, I think I like the relative simplicity of snow. And I'm sure people are like, wait a minute, what? I think it can be simple. I think it's with a good process. It's a very simple problem, right? Or a puzzle. And I also do like puzzle, like figuring things out. And I also, in that same thought, it's also a puzzle that sometimes the pieces change shape on you while you're building the puzzle. And I think that makes it kind of fun. I think also too that it's, there's an educational part. I think it's I don't have educational, I guess. It's more of I don't know. There's a toughness to it, or just a really pride because you're helping people out. This is we're here in Western Massachusetts, and I think it's a great service for people that they really need it. They don't really they just know they need to clean a yard, but it's you're keeping people safe from getting to work and to their kids or their grandparents or whomever getting in and out of their homes. I think there's something about that, and people are really grateful to that. The right kind of people. Some people aren't. They don't quite appreciate the service. So, but yeah, I think I love snow. It's weirdly enough one of the service offerings that I find to be the most easy to figure out and to sort of create a process around because it is only so many steps to pretty much beginning to end, and it's fun to build a process around, I guess, because again of the changing factors. So.
Yeah, absolutely. That diversification of the business model with snow is exciting, and you and I have talked about it, and it's one of those things that's funny because most people look at snow and look at it as such a challenge, which it is, but they, I don't like it. I'm ready to divest of it. What have you? You're passionate for it, not only because of personal passion, but the way that you're able to make it meaningful in building a process. So let's talk about that process a little bit. I would definitely use one word to describe you based on our interactions, and that's intentional. If you're intentional about the way you market your business, about how you sell your snow services, and about how your company's growth trajectory is laid out, even in the midst of low snow seasons that we've all kind of come up against in recent years. How does that intentionality in your business planning help lead to greater sales and greater revenues?
Yeah, it's funny when I was kind of rolling through the questions here with you, and I think intentionals are really I would never thought about it. I'm like, I guess I am relatively intentional with the way I do snow, and probably more so than any of my other services. But I think it demands that, right? So
Sure.
Because if you're not, you're kind of just running, chasing, different things. But so, yeah, we're very careful. We know who our client is. We know all these different things. So I think we know who we want as a client. We know that ideal client. So which helps add to that intentional, who we are going to market. So we're not going to just go, hey, we do residential snow plowing in this area. We created offerings that serve our ideal client. We have a prepaid model for our residential clients, which one price for an entire season. That is divided up into different types of services that you can offer for residential snow client, whether just being the driveway or walkways or ice management. But we're very intentional about who we're offering it to. And we are also very intentional about who really wants our product, and what, if it's going to serve their needs. And that goes to the marketing. It also goes to our hiring. So we're intentional about our hiring, about who we want to have working with us. All of our staff is in-house at the moment. We'll get to that probably talk about scaling, where that may come in and change. But yeah, and pretty much everything else. And then even just our planning purpose is very intentional. So we have, after the season ends, we tend to kind of review like, hey, how did the season go? And we start looking at like, do we need to change an offering? What do we see coming up? We have certain parts of our season or off season where we're selling or reselling back our snow to our clients and services to our clients for snow, using that again intentionally earlier in the season. So we have an idea of what we need to market, how we need to market, and seeing what kind of, if there's any pushback pricing wise, although we haven't changed our residential snow model pricing since we started it, even with all additional costs and things like that changing. So
some of that prepaid model, you're talking about some of the selling back of services. And I know we'll talk a little bit more about some of these things, but at a high level, what is that? Just so the audience that's listening today maybe understands what you're talking about. Just from a high level, we don't need to get into the nuts and bolts of it, but.
Right. So most people probably listening to this are probably familiar with the traditional per push model, right? So you're giving a client a cost per time that you visit the property, primarily in residential. Commercial obviously is a different animal altogether. So, I think as we continue to see more transitional snow events or less regularity that we've commonly seen as probably when we were growing up, and we're seeing different types of snow events or icing events, it's making that model really difficult for a lot of markets because it costs a lot of money. As everyone that's listening to this knows what plows cost, what these trucks cost, they're not cheap. And so the decision I made, I think we made it in 2020, mixed of COVID and everything. I was like, okay, we just came off a really bad year. We're primarily per push. This is when I was talking about at the beginning of the podcast, how we had 200 some odd clients and we didn't make very much money. And actually it really cost us quite a bit. And it was a really tough spring. We're like, oh, this is like, we really weren't feeling good. And I said, I never want this to happen again. So we changed over to what's called the prepaid model. So we have tons of data we've pretty much almost since we started, time on job, all that stuff, how many, and we took all that, even snow data, how many pushes and all that stuff we did. Long story short, we basically took that, converted that to a model that was sustainable for us to stay in business and continue to make enough money to get ourselves through the winter and have a budget that we can set, and means we can hire and improve our quality of work, and we can be reliable. And they're not worried, we don't have to worry about, oh, gee, do we fix this plow? Because I don't know if we're going to have enough snow. Like, we know all of our equipment is up to date, ready to go. So yeah, that was, on a global level, we needed to change the model that we offered to our clients so we could continue to offer our clients snow services.
Right.
It was really at that point when I was like, we don't need to do this, or we can. And it would certainly be cheaper for us probably just not to offer it in many ways, because we could change the kind of equipment we use for our other part of our season, our growing season. Mm-hmm. But we get back to, I do love snow and I do enjoying it. And our clients do really value the service. And I think that's also, it's something that really makes them, fills the whole package for them for a full season type company. So almost kind of a necessary product offering. Yep.
Shifting gears just for a moment here, if you don't mind, before we jump back into some of this client satisfaction and marketing piece, you mentioned how important it is to hire the right people, to have the right people on the bus, if you will. we want to make sure that we note that because I think that's something that a lot of snow companies are struggling with given the labor market. You've had some of your team join us on interest group calls. You had someone at the recent SIMA symposium. Your team's obviously important to you as a business owner. What role does a good team member play in the strategy building process, and why is it important to have them involved in that process?
I think, I'll start with your last question first, is why is it important to have them part of the strategy? I think it's because if they're not part of it from the beginning, there will be really there's no buy-in, right? So it's like if they're not part of the decision, then they're just sort of being told. And I value my staff's opinion on a lot of things because I'm not the one in the field every day. I'm actually very seldomly when it comes to snow, as far as, again, harking back to my previous thing, I'm a big skier. So this wasn't always the case, but for a very long time, there was a powder day, I was plowing.
Yeah.
So with my staff, they're in the field. They're doing all of the work. They're seeing the problems, the scenarios. They're living it. So, sort of a recap. After each storm, we actually meet as a group a day or either day after or 2 days after, depending on the length of the storm. And we're saying, hey, what went well? What didn't go well? Like, what should we change? What kind of things like that? So, and I lean on them. And I think also having the right people in the right seat is really key too. So it's just knowing your team members, their strengths, and putting them in those places where they're going to do the absolute best. My snow team, as far as, my managers, I have my maintenance manager who actually was at the SIMA convention. I think he saw you guys when he was out there. Ken, he doesn't come. He's our maintenance manager, but he basically kind of orchestrates the whole snow operation. So in the winter, more operates kind of like an operations manager, and then works with some of our seasoned people like Eric, and who's basically our shop foreman, but also has done snow with us for a very long time, understands all things snow related. Rich, our hardscape foreman, does so. He works with them, chat, and they're part of the decision making. They actually run all of our training in the fall. So when we start training, so without my team, and then of course the awesome field staff that come in at 3 a.m. and are ready to go and tackle the day and like, hey, I've got this kind of snow attitude. So they are the lifeblood of the snow side of this business. So I think it's absolutely key that they're in the right spot, and I listen to what they say. I help guide really what we're going to offer for decision, as far as products that we might change and stuff like that. So they've got a wealth of information, and it really helps us fine tune our products for our clients and find out where we might need to change a few things. So yeah, I think it's having a good team behind you. And even if it's, a smaller company just starting out, maybe that number 2 guy, or, maybe you got a few people in your company, I think finding that person that, even within the few people, say you're still plowing in the field by yourself or, with a couple other people, I think you got to look and like, hey, so-and-so does really good at this kind of work, or, and he gets things really organized, or she really gets these, does great on XYZ. I think that's important to recognize that and not to be like, oh, they just kind of, it's like, oh, well, they just do really good at that. It's like, start looking at how you can utilize them if you're growing and you want to grow and you want to scale, where they might fit best and how they might fit into the whole process of your snow business.
Okay, folks, we've come to the time in our podcast where I would like to take a quick moment to thank our sponsors over at Fisher. Thanks to Fisher and their team for being a part of the Snow Talk ongoing success.
The winters push us hard, but Fisher Nation always knows how to push back. And now we have a new neighbor to push with us. Stormbox, built with trace edge technology that plows precisely and slashes salt usage. So with every storm that comes knocking, pounding, or even kicking down the door, you'll be ready with a storm of your own. The Stormbox from Fisher Engineering. The legacy rolls on.
Torrey, you recently presented on the importance of selling safety to our residential interest group here at SIMA. I think most of our listeners would agree that this is an important topic because we want to get our snow operators home safe, and we want to provide a safe environment for our clients. And in the world that we live in, where things are so litigious, we also are just always thinking safety. But what does selling safety as a concept mean to you and to your business, and why is it such a crucial aspect of what you're doing?
Well, I think, when we started changing our products, but also just understanding like, really, what are we doing? Like breaking down snow as to like, what are we really selling here? Right. It's a peace of mind. But what are people also really truly worried about? Right. And we kind of came up with and was safety, right? This is not, people aren't really concerned. Oh, we live in New England. Snow is part of New England, right? It's quintessential New England. It's pretty. It's really nice. But
right.
The part that gets people really, really anxious and creates all of that stuff that we talk about in the industry that especially residential sector, people calling and all these things, it's out of concern for well-being and safety. So stop sort of going, and it's also, safety itself is a different thing than saying snow plowing, right? So it's some intangibles there. I mean, I can sell you I will plow your driveway from point A to point B, but it's how, right? All the things that go behind it. It's like, well, when are we going to show up? And what's important to us how are we going to do that? What's important to you as a client to make sure that your space is, safe? And how are we going to communicate? How are we going to know those other things? And so basically that safety element is the fear or the anxiety driver for most people related to snow. And so I felt that it really spoke better to our clients and especially our ideal clientele, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that really are the ones that kind of drove and helped define this product for them, was to make sure that we alleviated that. And everything we do related to snow management, we kind of go, safety, right? Like that helps drive decision making. Like, how are we going to change the product to, I say an ice management product? Like, okay, well, let's look at that. Like, does that give us the range that we typically use, as far as, below freezing and stuff like that? Because that is our sort of blinding way of looking at things. It's not just go, I just want you to plow the middle of my driveway. I don't need to plow anything. Well, there's a good example in the sales side of things. It blends into that. It's like, well, sorry, Mrs. Jones, like we can't just do a single plow. You have a full driveway. We're going to do the whole thing because that's the way we do our business. And we're not going to leave a place that could be, unsafe. Right. So it helps define the product. It helps let clients know, look, when you're hiring us, you're not just hiring a plow person that's just going to show up whenever, and maybe you may do or not, maybe don't know or do know when they're coming, but that the safety part of the element drives everything we do in that space. And on a employee side, same kind of thing. We're also looking at, we don't take on certain types of driveways or things where we feel the equipment might not be well fit for that space. We're not just looking to go get 1 million driveways. It's like, well, we're looking to get maybe 1 million correct driveways that are good for us.
Right.
So it's looking at like, nope, that hill's a little too steep for us for our equipment and the safety of our staff, even to the point where if we have a client that has a big steep hill or something like that, that shaded and all these things it doesn't feel like it will be safe for our staff to plow it without like ice management underneath it or knowing that there's been ice management, we won't take the work, but we'll stress that, hey, we would be happy to do this, but we need to have this part of the element for your care of your property, your management. So it is the driving factor for our company. It defines pretty much everything that we do and every decision we make. And it sets us apart from our competition because I'm selling safety while every other company in my area is selling snow plowing. It's like, well, it's a commodity. We're not a commodity. We're a totally different thing.
I would say.
Agree more. And I think I know a lot of people on the residential or on the commercial side, as the commercial market's been very wonky in the last few years. Pricing's crazy. Like our prices have gone, our costs have gone up, but a lot of these third parties are, that the pricing is just not right. So we don't take that kind of work. But at the end of the day, many of these commercial properties want safe spaces, but they're utilizing a method that does not support that. And so they're not getting good treatment. So I would be willing to bet that we'll start to see that commercial spaces will sort of come back to that idea of like, hey, no, we want things to be safe. Like this is not like the lowest, we don't need the lowest bid. We need to make sure that these things are met because I think they'll start seeing it in the numbers, as you mentioned, the litigious side of things, especially in the commercial sector. I think we're going to see a little bit more of like, oh yeah, we've got all these losses and they're just stacking up and we need to figure out why that's happening. And they'll start going to their management companies. And I think the management companies are going to have to start to step it up a little bit, bring or be able to offer that to their clients, or some of them. Well, we've worked with some really amazing property management companies, big ones that have really cared about safety, and they have a really good setup for that. I think was also kind of what helped us understand early on, like what it really means to keep a space safe. And yeah, I think we're going to see the tide changing in that space. We turned down so many offers for commercial snow simply by the fact that they don't meet the parameters. Like either their push trigger is too high or they clearly don't value safety. So that's usually the kickback. It's like, hey, appreciate the offer, but I don't think this is the right property for us. We look at this as our trigger. We require for commercial sites of this size to have ice management as a part of the whole thing. So I think not that, we're a small company, but I think as more companies, and I'd stress that the commercial companies this way, is that saying no now is probably the best thing we could do, because it will force the market to change, being okay with saying no. So I realize we get a little off on the selling safety, but I think it's a key thing for us to think about, because stop going, oh yeah, we'll do it that way, because it's not right. If it's not right for your business, I think at the end of the day, then you shouldn't be doing it. So,
right. So discuss with me for a minute, how do you communicate the importance of selling safety to the individual client or customer, and what does it mean to them, and how are you educating them in this space to get them over the hump? So you're talking about, hey, ice management's needed. How are they reacting to that? How are you educating them on some of that importance behind some of that? I'm sure you are. So I'd love to hear that.
Yeah. No, it's funny because I when I tell people that, and I talk with other people that are in the residential snow space, and I'm like, oh yeah, like we do a ton of like ice management. It's like for our residential clients. They're like, what do you mean? It's like, yeah, we sell tons of ice management to all of our clients. Like, I mean, that's just, we started offering it, but it was like, they're like, what? And I'm like, oh, they want that there? I'm like, I think they want it everywhere. I just think that they just don't know that they do, right? Because no one's ever really tried. But I think the salted sand days, I mean, I know that gets used in other markets still, but not in ours. I think that was like what people didn't like about it. It made the driveway all messy and made their house dirty and stuff like that. But with the new salts and ice management products are out there, I think that's less of a concern. We have a sales video that we have that I did a few years ago. It really just talks about our program and that we're selling safety. Our program descriptions, albeit pretty much the only thing it's really more to like, hey, you asked for snow plowing. Well, here's snow plowing, but the descriptions of those services speak to what we're selling. Really, at the end of the day, is the selling of the safety. So, from our advertisement, it's sort of loose in there. Again, it's because it's such I think, in our market now, it's not something that gets done a lot. So we do it more about package value or bundling these snow services. Hey, get snow plowing for XYZ. But we start hitting them really with the selling of the safety kind of once they become in sort of top of funnel, or just like one step in our sales funnel, because it's a really hard, I think, on the way part of the top one of the top of the funnel is like trying to tell people about safety at that point. I don't think it resonates yet until they get to, into our funnel, or they get onto our website. It depends on which stage, whether it's like direct in and they fill out a form, or if they're going to our website and reading more about us, that's where you're seeing us talk about safety. And that carries through pretty much to the end. Our follow-up emails post proposal to them are very minded in safety. Hey, this is what we recommend. That's what we talk about all the way through the process until they're a client. And so much too. And then we also upsell to our current clients that may just have snow plowing unlimited. And we will offer, we talk the talk and we walk the walk as well, right? So we will market them, if there's a big icing event and some of the, however many clients don't have ice management, we'll send them an ice management email like, hey, just checking in, like we've got an ice event coming and we're worried about people, we're worried about things being really slick. And I think what we're doing for our clients that already have it is this. And we think this would be a good approach for you right now. We understand you don't want this all the time, but like, this is something probably will work for you. And most times people like, yes, please, thank you. And we're walking the walk, right? We're not just like, well, you didn't select it, so too bad. It's like, no, we're looking at it and going, no, we mean it. Like, we'll offer it, even though you haven't signed up for it and you're not under, contract as far as that. We will do a one-time product because, again, at the end of the day, we're looking to help keep your property safe. We don't typically like one-offs because, again, there's some liability stuff, right? Well, did they, didn't they? But the key is it's usually in a post type thing. It depends. But again, it's meant to help mitigate risk and keep people safe on their properties. So yeah, I think that part of it too is, walking the walk, so to speak. So
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, we've talked about people on the team. We talked about growing the best bench we can, if you will. And we've talked about educating the customer. But on the other side, walking the walk, not just talking the talk, requires, a certain level of education for your team, a certain level of, hey, if we're going to sell safety, we've got to act as if safety is our top priority. So what are you guys doing at BetterView Landscapes, on a day-to-day during the snow season and pre-snow season to really, to make sure your snow operations are the safest they can be? Any best tips for folks listening?
Yeah, I think the key, once our season ends, we look at equipment, right? So first of all, we look at what equipment we have. How is it working? Is it operating correctly? We've obviously handled anything through the winter, but so equipment is a huge thing, and use and even also too, safety is sort of we work in cold environments. So more often than not, also when we get to equipment side of things, we're looking at, and sort of safety adjacent is like making sure that our team can be warm whenever possible. So it comes down to purchasing equipment. We have a sidewalk snow machine that's a cabbed machine because, well, it's a lot easier to stay in a cab machine and be warm than having to get out there and shovel. We do have shovel teams, but again, we're making sure those teams have good jackets and good gloves and all that stuff. So that's one way. Training, huge. Before the season, we do 1 or 2 trainings. Depends on how many new people we've got coming in. This year, we'll be doing 2. We sort of decided to do an early one and then do a little bit later, just after our season started. For us, our coverage period starts November 15th, unless otherwise specified. But 15th is kind of our classic space. And so we train, we go through all the equipment, all the safety measures. We make sure that people are cross-trained, even though they might not ever use that reverse snow-mounted tractor, that they know how to operate it or at least understand it enough. So if something, they needed to move it or they need to just understand it, that they do. Go through, basically go through how to plow. Sometimes we've got a couple of videos. There's some great YouTube videos out there that are free for use, but they're funny, but they're great learning tools because you can go, whoa, what went well here? So training, is really a big part of it. And then our ice management practices, and we chatted about it before, we treat our residential clients like we treat our commercial clients. Same thing. If we are doing a pre-treat, we're going to pre-treat our residential that's what they have for ice management. If they have an ice management service on their thing, we'll pre-treat when we're doing a commercial. Pre-post, same thing. Nothing changes. It's not ever like, they got enough material on site. We'll go look at the site, put down product. I think I'll get a couple good tips at the end. I'll share a couple of things in that space. But looking at those practices, are we keeping this space safe? And then as far as a team, again, going back to training, making sure that they're safe, and also making sure our teams have protective equipment, make sure they have, again, mentioned warm jackets. We've got the insulated grippy gloves, which are great for snow service, and make sure that we give them winter hats that match. So making sure they've got extra boots. And another fun thing we do is we also feed our staff. So we have a refrigerator in our shop. We got drinks, stuff like that. We had a smaller shop. We wish we could go we have some more things for them, hot coffee, things like that. But we feed them. They can take snacks. We usually buy a bunch of things, people put in their trucks. Again, we'll also, if we have like longer storms, we will pay to, they've been out for 14 hours. They've kind of crossed over a meal time. They've been out, or they're between a first and second push or something to that effect. We'll usually have the teams, we'll just be like, go buy lunch or whatever meal, you're on at this time, whatever time it is, go take half an hour, 45, get some food, do your thing. That's great. And we'll pay for that. It's usually over, and it's usually when they're on a two push type scenario. Oh, well, also managing sleep, right? I think we've talked about this in our residential snow group, is that it's really important to manage that. So we look at our call times, like our readiness times, when we're going to call people in to come do work, but we give them a lot of heads up. So we're watching storms and we're saying, okay, this is something's coming up. We'll let them know like 5 days in advance. Hey, we have something that may be happening here. Like, be ready. We've standardized, I think, are pretty much standardized when we'll put crew out and send crew out. Most of our sending our teams out happens early in the morning, like 3 a.m. And we're pretty solid on that, because if there's anything happening over the night, our commercial properties are going to need something. So it's okay to allocate that way. But then also looking at like, gee, let's make sure we're not pulling our teams in too early, or so that way, and especially if they have to stay a lot later. So managing that, I think, is really key. And this speaks to, and I don't know if we chat about this in this, but employees, and I know that's one of the biggest challenges for snow management companies, is like, I can't find anybody. Nobody wants to come in. Well, I think the reality is you got to look at like, what are you asking people to do? It's like, it looks and can be and is really hard work, and it's cold, and you're asking people to get up early in the morning. So I think you need to be mindful of that and not be like, no, you're going to come in and work for 24 hours straight. No, that's not safe by any means. Yeah. And it's not something that people want to do in this just day and age. And that's where we are as people. And I completely agree, So I think that, or I don't even know if there's an or on that. I'd say, or, maybe pay a lot more. But I think at the same time, it just drains people. So I think managing people's time and making sure that they're getting well rested, the routes are attainable, that people aren't overloaded with stuff like that. And then we talked about sort of how important is your team. I think the overall team is really important, and having a team feeling is huge. And cultivating a team environment where people are willing to help each other out, because that's one of the things we stress during the winter too, is make sure, hey, you're done with your list. Cool. That's great. But is there someone struggling? Do we need help here? And I think creating a sort of supportive environment for that in that kind of atmosphere speaks to really good team environment, speaks to good safety, because you're going to be able to get things done quicker and safer and all those things. So I know I kind of went a little off there, but I think that's one of the core things that we're doing, day-to-day living safety is right. Managing our staff, making sure that it's a good place to work, that, having the right equipment, making sure our practices are good ones, and training, and then just supporting, and know that it's tough work and it's not always going to be the most fun to do, but try to make it as fun as it can be. So yeah. And our model supports that, right? So we had a lot of accounts. Well, some would say that a lot. For many, that's not a lot, but 250 accounts, and it was taking a long time. We were at maximum capacity, and now we're doing like 120, 125. So basically half, making the same amount of money and treating our staff really well. And they like that. I think it's what's important to a lot of clients, is that your model has to support it, and then what you do on the back end really, because you'll find I would say that prior to us model change, I mentioned a few minutes ago, we were pushed to the max. So like, are we really being safe? Yeah, we're selling safety to our clients, but like internally, are we being safe, right? Right. Are we asking too much of our employees to be out too late and tired? And I think we were. And I think that just really degrades the service offering too, which then of course degrades the safety level to our clients. So whatever snow model you decide on, that you consider all the costs. So that's the vehicles that you're using, the equipment that you have, and to look at and what it costs to do business, right? So just operating your business. If you're just a snow company, then this will be a different formulation. But if you're a year-round business, you might have assets, trucks and things like that, equipment that you're like, well, it doesn't get used in the winter. Okay, so cool. But those formulas are going to be different. There's a ton of consultants out in the world that can help you determine this, some good, some better than others. But if you don't understand these numbers, it's a quick way to go out of business, especially in the snow, especially in transitional areas, kind of like we are now here in Western Mass, where inconsistent snowfalls and things like that. So knowing what it costs to do business, provide the actual service, and price accordingly. That's the key. And make sure that your price or your model supports your business. Something that, before we did this back in the day, we didn't. We did this a lot in our growing side, looking at, spring and fall cleanups and things like that. We were realizing that the amount of hours that we spent at a place or all these things like that, it would have been better just to hand them like $100 and say, hey, Mrs. Jones, Mr. Jones, thanks for the, wanting to work with us, but here's $100 because this will be cheaper for us to do work with you than it would be to actually do the work for you because we were losing money. And that happens a lot more than people realize. And and then whatever model works for you, obviously in my market for us, and to keep things moving and to take out those peaks and valleys and highs and lows of a good season, bad season kind of thing, a prepaid model worked really well for us. So know your market, ideal client, know your numbers, and then make sure that you have a model that supports those things. And I think that you'll have in any type of service that you're offering, I think that's a really good sound way of thinking about things. And, 29 years ago when I started this business, I wish I had some of these things in my head because it would have been like a little bit easier. The curve would have been a little shorter. So
and what challenges were around that you faced when scaling your business, making some of these decisions to go from 250 to, down to, 150, 170, where you sit now? What challenges were there? If you'd be willing to share some of those, and how'd you overcome some of those?
Yeah, right. I don't think this is probably one of the best things you could ask, right? Because from challenges or problems or things like that, so many people just go, well, I don't like that, and they run away from it. For us, it was like we ran into the storm, right? And I kind of alluded to this back, 2020, we changed our model in the snow side of things. It was like, whoa, this was a really, really bad winter, and we did not make very much money. And this isn't supportive. We can't keep going like this. And so I was like, okay, so instead of just going, well, it'll be better next year, it'll snow more next year, I'm like, no, this is like, I think the reality is that we need to be, whether there's good snow years or bad snow years, we can't allow ourselves to make these investments, because this is a big investment. As again, everyone on this podcast is listening and does snow knows it's a big investment, equipment wise and people wise, and insurance in many markets too, including ours. So, right. I think for us, that was one of the biggest challenges. Like that was one of them. I think the other challenge too is changing people's mindset, our clients' mindset about safety, because there's people that value it, right? And they're like, oh, this is awesome. I can just pay you one price. I don't have to worry, and I'm going to be safe in my property. Cool. How quickly can I hand you a check or, pay my bill and sign up?
Right.
But there's other ones that are not that way. They're more like price-based, and they see zero value in what we do. And, well, as it's clearly, obviously, obvious that, well, these aren't my kind of client. And probably really many of you out here that are listening should probably be your client either. Because if they don't, and as I know, if anyone's either listening to this podcast or a member of SIMA, you've taken a tremendous step to be a professional. And if you're listening to this podcast, you're investing in yourself to be a professional. So be a professional, and it costs a certain amount of money to be a professional. Many of you go to these SIMA events so you've invested yourself. Well, you're worth something, worth more than just I'll take $25, Mrs. Jones, and don't, value yourself. And again, another little piece of advice, I think, is just value, the service you offer. But I think that's the key thing, is making sure that the people that value your service should be your ideal client. But that was a hard one to figure out. Like, it took a little while. Like, oh, well, no, and we just need all these people to make this money. That was definitely a difficult point to make change and realization. But after we did, I'll tell you that the pressure and the stress of snow just went away. And I think you start to change the mindset when you start to do the work, and then your clients start telling other people in their neighborhood, and they start seeing the results. Like, hey, our neighbors across the street's driveway's down to blacktop, and my plow guy just came, but he hit our mailbox, and there's still tons of snow in our driveway, and I just slipped getting into my car, and now I'm got to go to the doctor's to go fix my broken thumb or whatever. So I think those were some of the challenges. But once you kind of just get past those, especially if you know your business, and you know your business more than you do. Usually you just need to kind of step back out from it, especially if you're in it day to day. You need to kind of go, wait a minute. I used to get these when I was on vacation. I'd go on vacation for a week, and as entrepreneurs, we never shut our brains off, right? So we're always thinking about these things. This is when I would start looking. I would be able to get a little bit of perspective, and I think that's key. So I think that would be another thing I would recommend when trying to scale, or when you want to get over these challenges. Sometimes you don't even realize they're challenges, is to step back a little bit from their business and kind of look at it from the outside. And that's a lot easier to do when you're not either in your office or out in the field, or both.
It's been awesome. I just want to thank you for being who you are and being intentional about your process and being willing to then share that with all of us. Any final tips or tricks that you say, hey, okay, Evan, you didn't ask me this, or we didn't cover this, that you want to share with the folks listening today? Yeah,
I think one of the things that I would say is that if you're not a member of a professional organization like SIMA, I think these are great tools to have in your pocket. There's a lot of resources in a lot of these different spaces where they have training modules and things like that. I think even if it doesn't fit initially, or I think it's good to read through. I remember going through the commercial side of things with SIMA, just reading through it, and you're like, best practices and all this good stuff. And I've attended other events. I think those are really key things to kind of go through and to be a member of, I think. And peer groups. I mean, I'm a member of quite a few peer groups, and I think those are really helpful. You'll learn a lot. I know I've learned a bunch in our the SIMA residential group that I'm a part of. I enjoy that a lot. I know that I don't know it at all. I think that's another good piece of advice. Just know that you don't know it all, and be willing and open to hearing things and seeing and learning new stuff, whether you use it or not. I'll tell you 9 out of 10 times you probably will pick up some great nugget that will help improve your business. So yeah, I could go on. There's a million different tips, tricks, but I think as far as related to this, some peer groups and groups like this, and listen to podcasts, and just improve and better yourself, and you'll better your business. So
absolutely. Well, thanks again, Torrey. I've really enjoyed our conversation today, and I hope that our listeners have as well. If you like today's episode, be sure to share it with a colleague or industry peer, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks again to all of our loyal listeners for making our podcast possible, and thanks to our sponsor, Fisher. Take care and be safe out there.
Thanks for listening to Snow Talk, sponsored by Western Snowplows and Fisher Engineering. Check out all of our episodes at sima.org/podcast.